Welcome back, everyone. This is the next part in building the subscription blog app series. In the last part, we set up Firebase, and in this part, we're going to start talking about in-app purchases, setting them up, as well as creating our paywall. For those of you that might recall, we're going to be basically having a cap on how many stories in blog posts somebody can read, and we're going to be leveraging RevenueCat to upsell our subscription. So without further ado, let's go ahead and open up Xcode and jump back into our project here. And the other thing I've gone ahead and done on App Store Connect, you will need to have an Apple developer account. Go ahead, sign into your account and create a app instance here. The really important thing here is to make sure that your bundle ID in your application instance on App Store Connect matches your project bundle ID. The reason that it's really important that they match is because this is how your project is going to associate your in-app purchases that we're going to set up here in just a moment. But before we even go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and select the simulator. Let's hit the run button. Let's make sure everything is still building and showing up on our simulator. And I don't think we've created a paywall view controller quite yet. So cool, looks like everything's building. Let's go ahead and create that file as well. So the premise of the paywall view controller is basically going to be, if someone isn't a subscriber, they're not a current premium user, we want to upsell them the subscription. So we want to have a nice landing sort of page where they can go and, see more about the subscription and have a subscribe button, have some of the required terms of service and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and pause the app and let's take a peek into our controllers. So we have our core tabs, which makes sense. We've got our authentication controllers for sign in, sign up, and then we've got our posts, but we don't have our upsell. So I'm going to go ahead and actually create a new group, and I'm going to go ahead and call this other just to keep everything organized. And let's create a new file here. It's going to be a Cocoa Touch class. Now we want to subclass a UI view controller, and instead of actually calling it an upsell view controller, let's go ahead and call it a paywall view controller, since that's basically what its purpose is going to be. Let's go ahead and give it a run, or give it a save rather, I should say. Now in here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have a nice UI to, purchase the subscription, or enroll, I should say, as well as restore purchases. But before we do any of that, let's go ahead and give this guy a nice background color. So I'll go ahead and say view background color is going to be system background. And in here, the UI is basically going to be threefold. So let me just write out comments here so we know what we want. So first, we're going to want our call to action buttons, which are going to be subscribe, restore purchases. We're going to want our terms of service, which is pretty self-explanatory. We're also going to want a close button at the top with maybe a title as well, so the user actually knows what they're looking at. And then of course in the middle, we're going to want pricing and product info. And I'm also going to add a nice header image just to give it a little more of a nice aesthetic feel. So that's in a nutshell what we're going to want here. So before we start building out this UI here, let's talk about presentation of this controller. So we don't want to be checking in a million different places throughout our project if the user is subscribed. We're actually going to be using RevenueCat to figure out what the current quote-unquote entitlement is, which is a term we'll talk about in the next video. So my point is here, what we want to do is in our managers folder, we have this pretty sweet IAP manager object. And what we can go ahead and do, and actually we already stubbed it out for is premium, what we can go ahead and do is call this function, and this is going to determine whether or not the user is currently premium and whether or not we should show the upsell on a particular interaction. So for is premium for now, we're just going to hard code it and say that it is not premium, the current user, since we haven't even implemented in-app purchases. And what I'm going to go ahead and do in the view controller that launches when the app is first opened, which is home, in viewed load, after a slight delay, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to check that option. So we're going to say if IAP manager, and actually we want this to be with a slight delay, so we're going to say async after now plus maybe, I don't know, like 3 seconds. We'll go ahead and add here. We're going to go ahead and say if IAP manager shared is premium, and inside of here we're going to add an exclamation mark right there. If the user is not premium, we're going to go ahead and create an instance of the paywall view controller, and we can go ahead and say self.present that particular VC with an animation completion block is nil. So let's go ahead and give our app a run, and we should see that this other view controller does in fact pop up as soon as we launch our app and we're on the home view controller. So bear with my simulator here. And we should see that the screen is going to change as soon as it gets to home. Sometimes the simulator loves to be a tad bit slow, just bear with it. And in 3 seconds, we should see it. Let's see if we don't. All right, we're on the sign-in screen, and that makes a lot of sense. We actually want to add this on the sign-in screen while we test, since we actually set up already the sign-in. So let's actually move that code. We're going to jump into the auth controller, particularly for sign-in. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that code in here. Go ahead and give it a run one more time. And let's make sure now, when we get to the sign-in screen, the other controller for the paywall pops up. Now, the other controller is going to be completely empty since we haven't, of course, built it yet. But you guys get the premise. So in 3 seconds, there it is. There is our other controller. Awesome. We're going to have a nice header image up here, maybe a little close button, and some more information. So before we get to that, let's go ahead and create our in-app purchase in Apple's dashboard. So in the dashboard, once you're in App Store Connect and you've created this app instance, what you want to click on the left here is in-app purchases. There's an option called Manage. You're going to go ahead and click that. And the steps to create an in-app purchase, specifically for a auto-renewable subscription, is to create a subscription group. Now, a group can have multiple tiers of subscriptions. So for example, you might have silver, gold, and platinum, and you might allow your user to upgrade and downgrade accordingly. Now, we're just going to have one subscription, but I at least wanted to toss that out there in case that helps with your business model and how you're thinking about setting up your subscriptions for your application. So cool. So once this guy has loaded up over here, the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do, there's a little option right here, which is going to say app-specific shared secret. Now we're going to want to hit that, and we're going to hit this big generate link. And this is something that we're going to want to put into the RevenueCat dashboard once we set that up in the next video. But for now, go ahead and copy and paste this, and I'm going to toss it into the IAP manager. Really important that you don't leave this in your app. I'm literally tossing it in here so we don't have to go back and generate it again, but we're going to give this to RevenueCat. So I'll even actually put here RevenueCat shared secret, hence the name secret. Keep it secret, please, please, please. Let's go ahead and continue. The next thing we want to do is hit this plus button to add a in-app purchase. First modal you're going to get is going to ask what type of purchase you want to add. So we are interested in auto-renewable subscriptions. And we're going to go ahead and check that box, and we're going to go ahead and hit create here. The first thing it's going to ask you for is to create a group. So basically this group is going to have a reference name. So I'm going to go ahead and call it Thoughts Premium. The next thing is going to be the product ID for this particular in-app purchase. So a good premise and a good convention is to take your app's bundle ID and just suffix onto the end of it the ID that you want to use. So we're going to go ahead and say iOS Academy.thoughts.premium, just like that. And once you've added both of those, go ahead and hit the button to continue. It's going to ask to create a subscription group reference, and we can just go ahead and call this Thoughts Premium since that's what we are going to be selling. Go ahead and hit create. And it's going to ask you for a bunch of more metadata about your subscription. So things like, how much is it? What's the title that's going to show up to the user? So let's go ahead and do all of that. So here we see all the stuff we've added so far. The first thing we want to do is, what is the duration of the subscription? Now we're going to sell our subscription monthly since that's a pretty good cadence for us to charge the user. The next thing that we're going to want to go ahead and do is add a pricing plan, because it's pretty important to charge the user some amount of money. So we're going to hit plus, and it's complaining that we haven't saved the duration that we have selected there. So before you hit plus and go to the other page, make sure you don't forget to hit the save button. We'll hit the plus here. It's going to ask what type of currency we want to use. We're going to stick with USD, and we're going to be selling our Thoughts subscription for $4.99 a month. I think that's pretty affordable. It's probably in the range for most customers. So we'll go ahead and hit next here. It's going to generate the prices in all the corresponding currencies. So we're going to just take a quick look at it. It gives us the option to tweak any of these if we so choose to do so. We're not going to. We're going to, trust Apple, and we're just going to hit create here. And once you've hit create, it's going to say that your subscription price has been created. You can hit OK. Now, before you leave this page, don't forget to hit save one more time. Apple makes you hit save in a lot of places. Slightly annoying, but that's all right. And once this is saved, we're going to want to go back to the previous page by just selecting it like that. And on this page, we do want to go ahead and add some localization. So at the bottom here, you'll see this App Store promotion option. Above that, you'll see localization. So in this, you're going to want to select the language that's your primary language. For us, it's English US. And this is what's going to show to the user when they see the share sheet on their actual device, when they hit subscribe or purchase or whatever your button's going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Premium Monthly, and the description is going to be get access to all Thoughts posts we just say get access to all Thoughts posts. You can go ahead and suffix every month or for life or whatever you want to call it, but the point is this description should be fairly descriptive in terms of like what the user is paying for. So get access to all Thought posts and read all articles. And there's also a limit to characters, so just be mindful of that. There you saw that I went over, so we can say read all. It looks like the period doesn't fit, but that's okay. So we'll go ahead and do that. Scroll all the way up and make sure you hit save again. And now that we've added all this stuff here, we're actually good to go with this dashboard. We'll want to do RevenueCat in the next one, but the one thing that's really important that I want you to do next is copy your product ID here, which is io.iosacademy.thoughts.premium, and we're going to be testing all of our app integration with in-app purchases here in Xcode. Now, one tricky thing about doing it that way is Xcode doesn't actually allow the user to create or make real legitimate in-app purchases since it's a test environment. So Apple has given us a mechanism to go ahead and mock all of this data. So I want to go ahead and create a new file here, and we're going to search for a StoreKit configuration, and you can leave the name as the default. And basically this StoreKit configuration allows your app to specify, mock products based on the data that we've supplied here. And when we go ahead and test our integration, we can do it here in Xcode without having to run to a device. So let's go ahead and hit the little plus at the bottom left. We want to add a auto renewable subscription, basically exactly what we did in App Store Connect. I'm going to even match the name here. So the group name will be Premium. It'll give us a element in the group here by default, which we'll want to go ahead and tweak. First up, we're going to say the price is $4.99. The reference name will be Premium Monthly. And the most important thing to validate your code is the product ID here, which I went ahead and copied. Once you've gone ahead and done that, let's see, we don't have any type of offer. You could offer a free trial if you choose to do so. Promotion offers, we don't care about that, but the one that we do care about here is localization. This is a thing that the user is going to see, so pretty important. So I'm going to go ahead and say, once again, Premium Monthly, and here it's going to be unblock all Thoughts posts, and we'll go ahead and hit done. And one last thing that a lot of folks forget to do, once you've created this file, you want to tell Xcode to use this file whenever we run our app in the simulator. So I went ahead and hit that drop down and hit edit scheme. And in the run tab here on the left, what you want to go ahead and do is find the StoreKit configuration option. And by default, it's set to none. You want to go ahead and change it to the new one that you just created and hit done, and you should be good to go. Let's go ahead and just run our app and make sure that nothing is crashing. If it's not crashing, that's great. That means that we are using the StoreKit configuration configuration that we went ahead and just added here. Next up, we're gonna draft up our paywall view controller since that's pretty important, and then we'll wrap it up here. In the next video, we're gonna actually be leveraging RevenueCat, setting up their dashboard, as well as, you know, writing the minimal code that we want to interface with making purchases and all that good stuff. So cool, so it looks like our app has launched here, no crashes, which is a good sign. Let's go and create that upsell view controller, which I believe we called it paywall, and it's under other. So let's go ahead and do that. So first and foremost, we're gonna want all these UI elements here, but before I even do that, let's go ahead and open up SF symbols. And the reason we wanna open up SF symbols is I wanna get a crown image, and that crown image is basically gonna serve as, you know, the symbol that we're gonna use to represent our premium feature set. So go ahead and search for crown here. And we are going to want to use, let's go ahead and use crown.fill. You can go ahead and select it, hit Command-Shift-C. Make sure you add the shift to copy the name and not the icon itself. And let's go ahead and start creating these. So header image is going to be a private let header image view is what it's actually going to be. It's going to be a UI image view. And we'll go ahead and put an image in here with the one that we just created. So we'll say UI image view is a UI image view. We're going to go ahead and create this with an image, and it's going to be a system named image of what we just copied. We'll go ahead and return it here. I'm going to also say that the tint color will be white since we're going to put it on a brightly colored background. I'm also going to go ahead and say content mode is going to be scale, aspect, fit. You can do fill as well, but we want it to fit, and we want to maintain the aspect ratio. So there is our header image. We're also going to want a header image container, and that should be a pretty good sign that you might want to abstract some of this stuff to its own view, and depending on how we do on time, maybe we'll do that in this video as well. So let's go ahead and do the close button up here as well. So let's go ahead and say this is going to be close. We're going to say private let's, and actually you can do this as a bar button item as well. So let's actually do that. So if we jump into the sign in view controller, again, Command-Shift-O to open up this prompt to search for different files. Instead of presenting our view controller directly, we're going to create a navigation controller. So we'll say navigation controller here, and we're going to wrap the VC, and this guy is going to be the nav VC, just like that. And let's go back to our paywall view controller, and to set up that close button, we're going to have our dedicated function. We're going to go ahead and say private func did tap close, which is going to handle the actual tap. And then we're also going to have another function, private func setup close button, just like that. And we'll call that function here setup close button. And in here, all I'm going to go ahead and do is say navigation item. We're going to set the right bar button item, and it's going to be a UI bar button item. And there's a couple different initializers. The one that we want is the system item, and we're going to say close. And let's try that one more time. We're going to go ahead and say dot close is what I'm looking for. Target is self. Action is the function we created right down below, so did tap close. We're going to pause the app from running, which it is, since our computer fan's getting nice and loud. We'll go ahead and line break this to make it look nicer. And to actually close the controller, we're just going to say dismiss, which is pretty simple. Animation will be true, and completion will be nil, just like that. So now that we've got the close button handled, let's talk about what else we want. So for this container, let's go ahead and actually abstract it. So we already have this header image here. So I'm going to open up our views folder. Let's see if I can find it. Here we are. And we're going to create a paywall header view So we're going to go ahead and create a new file. We're going to subclass a UI view. And this is going to be a paywall header view. And you guys will see why I'm abstracting it from the get-go instead of doing it after. It makes our lives a lot easier, actually. So we'll go ahead and toss in our image view in here. In the initializer that we want to go ahead and override, let's see, we want init with frame. So I'm looking for this one here. We want to go ahead and say super init with frame. We're also going to say clips to bounds is true. and we want to add our image view as a sub view. So we'll go ahead and do that and set a background color. I'm going to stick with a system pink. I think it's a pretty nice accent color. We're going to want to also do a required initializer, just like that. We're going to want to lay out our sub views, say super layout sub views. And the only thing we want to actually do in here is say header view or image view dot center is going to be the current center of this view. So we can just say go ahead and assign that to the center. And for the image view up here, we can hard code its frame. So we can actually go ahead and say cgrect. We can go ahead and make this 0, 0, and we can pick an arbitrary size for the width and height. So I'll say 220 by 220. So that should be pretty good. And now that we've got this here, we can actually lay it out on our paywall view controller. So here I'm going to go ahead and simply say private let header is going to be an instance of that view that we just created. And this is where our life gets a lot simpler. Now we can go ahead and say view add subview for said header. We're going to want to lay it out. So we'll say view did layout subviews. You want to override it. And here we want to assign its frame. Now we could use the verbose method of assigning its frame. However, we're going to be a little more intelligent about it, and we're going to add some extensions in our other folder, which is going to severely reduce the amount of code we have to write. So let's go ahead and create a new file. I'm going to go ahead and call it extensions.swift. And we're going to go ahead and add an extension onto UI view. Don't forget to actually import UIKit up here. And what I want to go ahead and do is when we traditionally want to get the width of the view, we need to say self.view.frame.size.width, which is kind of annoying. So here we could just go ahead and say frame.size.width, and we can use this computed property for width, and it reduces the verbosity of the code we'll write. So we'll want to do that for both width, height, left, right, top, and bottom. And this will really help us write our code with, less syntax and just more readable code in general. So let's go ahead and fill out the rest of these. This is going to be origin.x. The right is basically going to be the left plus the width is what I'm looking for here. Next one is going to be the top, which is going to be origin.y. And this one here will be bottom, which is basically going to be top plus our height. And the beauty of this now, if we go back to the paywall controller, is for this guy here, we can say cgrect. The x I'm going to go ahead and say is going to be 0. Y will be view safe area insets top. Width will be view.width, and height, we can go ahead and say view.height maybe divided by, 3.2, a little less than 1/3 of the height of this controller. So let me go ahead and line break this, and before we go ahead and do more of the UI, let's go ahead and run this and make sure that the tons of code changes that we've made thus far are looking good, and then we'll continue along. So go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. Make sure you don't have any build errors, and let's take a look at our simulator. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to build here. All right, looks like it succeeded. And in 3 seconds, we should see our paywall view controller pop up, get modally presented, and we should see the header with our crown icon as well as the background. So cool, so it looks like we are in fact seeing that. Crown icon looks a tad bit big. You might want to go ahead and adjust that. It's actually not centered either, so we might want to go ahead and do that as well. So let's go ahead and take care of that first. So we'll go into our views here. I'm going to go ahead and change, instead of doing here 220, let's go ahead and say maybe 110 by 110. And for laying it out, let's go ahead and actually do the calculations ourselves, because the center is actually giving us the views center, and this here, we want to actually use the bounds to do the calculation. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the center is going to be, instead of the center, the frame rather, I should say, is going to be cgrect. The x we're going to calculate in a moment. This is going to be 110 by 110. Now the x is going to be bounds.width minus 110 divided by 2. The height is going to be bounds.height minus 110 divided by 2. We're subtracting 110, so that's the width of the actual image view itself. So Once it's subtracted, it'll give us an appropriate calculation. So let's go ahead and give that a run one more time. And once our simulator decides to cooperate, we should see that everything is positioned much better. Awesome, looking pretty good. You also might want to go ahead and add a title at the top of this controller, since it's pretty important to let the user know what they're actually paying for and signing up for. So let's go ahead and do that. So here in view to load, I'm going to go ahead and call this Thoughts Premium, just like that. And let's talk about the rest of the stuff. So in the middle here, we're going to want to, properly display the price, as well as, the cadence that they're paying for, a subscribe button, and all the other jazz that we talked about. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's create the buttons first. Since they're pretty simple, we're going to be able to copy and paste one of them at least. So we'll go ahead and say this is a buy button, which is going to have a title of subscribe actually. So we're going to go ahead and create it with the anonymous closure pattern. This is going to be UI button. We'll go ahead and return button here. Button's title is going to be, like I said, subscribe for the state of normal. Button's background color, you can go ahead and pick the one that best meets your app's look and feel, but we're going to go ahead and use a system blue. And since our background is blue, we're going to make the title color a white. And let's see, we might want to give it a nice corner radius as well. One good thing that I'll mention here is you don't want to cut corners when you're building out your UI where you're actually getting users to sign up for your subscription, because this is the place where you really want to put some time and effort and what I like to call craftsmanship into what you're building. So once we have that buy button, we can actually go ahead and simply copy and paste it right down below. And this one here, I'm going to go ahead and call this a restore button. Apple requires us to have a restore purchases options for users that have previously purchased. So that'll be that. We're going to get rid of the background color, and in this case, the system link color will be the title color. So once we've gone ahead and done both of those, we want to configure the buttons. So how do we configure them? We first want to add subviews. So we're going to say the buy button as well as the restore button. And we want to attach the actual handlers to this button. So we're going to say set up buttons. And this function, we're going to toss right down below the layout function. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we're going to want those methods here. So this is going to be func did tap subscribe, just like that. And this is where RevenueCat will get hooked in for the actual purchase. And then the other button action, respectively, is going to be did tap restore, just like that. So in here, let's go ahead and connect them. So we'll say buy button, add target, self, selector will be did tap subscribe for the event of touch up inside, and similarly for restore, this is going to be did tap restore. Don't forget to tweak the button there. So the next thing we want to do is actually lay it out, but before we actually lay it out, let's talk about what it's going to look like. So we're going to have those two buttons, but below the button we want to have some terms of service. So let's actually go ahead and create the terms of service here. Now there are a number of ways you can go about doing this. You can use a label, you can use a text view. Let me go ahead and show you guys how the text view approach works, so you guys can pick and choose, which one you want to go with. So we're going to go ahead and say terms view is going to be a UI text view, just like that. And let's go ahead and put parens there. And here we'll say UI text view is a UI text view. The most important thing I'll call out is you want to disable editable on the text view, since you don't want the user changing your terms of service. The reason we're going to use a text view here instead of a label is it has the capacity to scroll its inner content, and the layout just looks a lot nicer. So we're going to go ahead and say that the alignment on here, the text alignment specifically, will be centered. I'm also going to go ahead and give it a smaller font size. You don't want to make it too small such that it's illegible, but you also don't want to make it too big, since it's not the nicest thing in your UI. We're going to say system font size, maybe we'll go with 14 here, and let's go ahead and add our actual terms. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the text in here will be the following. So we'll say this is an auto renewable subscription. It will be charged to your iTunes account before each pay period. You can cancel anytime by going into your settings and then subscriptions. And let's see, the other thing that you want to go ahead and do here is restore purchases if previously subscribed. Now, these types of terms are absolutely required by Apple. They actually mention it in their App Store review guidelines. So make sure once you implement, any type of subscription, you're definitely adding these. So let's go ahead and add this as a subview, and I'm going to lay this out before I even do the buttons. So here we're going to go ahead and say that this has a frame. We can be a little lazy and copy and paste this guy up here. And what do we want? Now the X, I'm going to go ahead and make this 10. Width is going to be the width minus 20. Maybe we'll make the height of this perhaps 100. And the way I'm going to go ahead and actually lay out the Y is we can go ahead and say view.height minus 100. So let's go ahead, and before we actually even run it, let me make the text color on here a little lighter, since we don't necessarily want this to stand out too much. So we're going to say text color is going to be a secondary label color. So go ahead and give it a run. I know we've written a ton of UI code, so let's make sure we actually test it and make sure it's looking pretty good, and then we'll lay out the buttons next. And we're almost good to go with this paywall screen, and it's looking pretty nice. So stick with me here, we're almost there. Let's go ahead and see our paywall, and boom, at the bottom we see our terms. And notice how they're fairly visible, but they're also not obnoxiously big and bright. And if the user chooses to read them, great. If not, it's definitely present, and it covers the bases of showing it to the user. So let's go ahead and lay out that buy button and restore button. I'll do the restore button first. So the restore button's frame is going to once again be CG rect, and we can go ahead and get away with copy and pasting. So we'll go ahead and do this. Now the X here, I'm going to go ahead and say 25, and we're going to go ahead and subtract 50. The height is going to be 48. You can also do 50, it's a little subjective. I'll do 50 here, and the thing that we care about is the Y. So let's see, this one here should be subtracting 50. The Y needs to be the top of the terms view, and then we can go ahead and subtract the height here with some buffer. So maybe we can go ahead and do minus 70. And this is why we added these properties for top, bottom, left, and right, because it makes our calculations just far cleaner. So let's go ahead and do the buy button, which is the other button that we've got. And now the only thing that we want to go ahead and actually do is do the restore button .top minus 70. You might actually want to even do minus 60 here, so they're a little closer. But let's go ahead and give it a run, and let's see what our buttons look like. And after our buttons are laid out, the next thing we want to do is actually show our price and, a little description blurb in terms of what the user is subscribing for. You can actually get that from the product that we're going to get back from RevenueCat, and we'll talk about that later on as well. But looks like our buttons are looking pretty good. So we have subscribe, we have restore purchases. Let's go ahead and create our our hero view here, the primary view that's going to show up and tell the user how much the thing is that they're buying and what they're buying. So what I want to do is I want to have a little sentence up here saying pay once, read all, or something along those lines. Subscribe to read unlimited posts, and then we're going to have a $4.99 monthly label right below that. So let's go ahead and let's see how we want to do that. So I'm going to leverage another view. So let's go ahead and create another sub view. So in the views folder here, we can do a new file. We're going to do a Cocoa Touch class, and this is once again going to be a UI view. Let's go ahead and call this UI view a paywall description view. You can alternatively leverage a attributed string, an attributed label. I like to do separate views. I think it's cleaner, but it's a little subjective. In here, we're going to have two labels, like I mentioned. So the first one is going to be a descriptor label. So we'll go ahead and say a descriptor label will be a UI label, and we can just create this once and copy and paste it and tweak it as need be. So this will be a UI label, just like that. We're going to go ahead and return this. Labels text alignment is going to be centered. Labels font is going to be system fonts, and we want it to be a size and a weight. So we're going to go ahead and say make this maybe 22 and a medium color. Make sure you say label.number of lines is 0 because this will allow your label to line wrap. And finally, go ahead and copy and paste this whole thing and paste it. And this is going to be the price label. So let's go ahead and update the name accordingly. Number of lines in this case will be 1. Font, we're going to go ahead and decrease a smidge as well. So we'll go ahead and say 18. And maybe we'll go ahead and say thin for the actual font weight. It'll look a little nicer. Let's go ahead and override the initializer. So we want init with frame once more. We're going to want to say clips to bounds, just like that. We'll bring in the required initializer as well. Boom, just like that. And we're going to want to lay out our sub views. So here in the initializer, let's go ahead and add the price label, just like that. And then we want to go ahead and also add a sub view for the other label, which is our descriptor label. Make sure you don't accidentally do description there. And let's talk about how we want to lay them out. So we could go ahead and do 50% for the height and width, or height for both of these labels. And let's see what that actually ends up looking like. So the top one is going to be the descriptor label. So let's go ahead and say descriptor label.frame is going to be cgrect. X will say 20. The width is going to be width minus 40. So we have a little bit of buffer. Y will be 0. And the height here will be the height divided by 2. Similarly, for the other one, the Y is going to be height divided by 2, and the X width and the height do not change. Don't forget to change this to the price label. So let's see what else we want to do. So for now, let's go ahead and hard code what these values actually say, and then later we'll configure it with the view model. So here I'm going to say the price is 4.99 month, just like that. And the other one you want to go ahead and do is label.text, and this one is going to be, let's see, we can go ahead and say pay once. So it's not really paying once, so that's not really a great sentence to put here. It's a little misleading. So we can go ahead and say join Thoughts Premium to read unlimited posts and articles. We can just maybe say articles instead of making it so wordy. Let's add an exclamation mark so for some little enthusiasm there. Let's go ahead and copy the name of that view, and we want to go ahead and stick it in here in the actual controller. So notice how the abstraction makes the number of elements here just far simpler. So we can call this hero view just like that, and we want to go ahead and simply add it as a subview and lay it out. So cool, we've added it as a subview, and let's go ahead and finally lay this guy out. So the frame here is once again going to be the whole cgrect 9 yards. The X here, we're going to go ahead and say 0. The Y is going to be the bottom of the header view, so we'll say this is the header.bottom. The width will be the entire width. Now the height here is a little complicated. Now what we want to do for the height is we want it to be up until the top of the buy button. So we don't want it to be the top per se, because that'll include all of this. So let's see how we want to do that calculation. So let's do buy button dot top, and we want to subtract the view dot safe area insets dot top, and then we also want to subtract the header dot height. So let's see what this looks like. I'm going to actually go ahead and also give this guy a background color so we can make sure that everything is laying out correctly. So we'll go ahead and say that the frame here is going to be, let's go with a system, I don't know, this should be color here, background color. This should be a system, let's go with a system, maybe yellow, nice and bright, and that'll give us a good look and feel in terms of what our layout is looking like. So go ahead and give it a run, and I think we should be in business, assuming all of our calculations are good. Hopefully there's nothing to fix here. Looks like we have successfully built. And everybody cross your fingers, and let's make sure our hero view is looking good. All right, bear with me here. Sometimes the simulator is super fast and other times not so much. So that's all right. We should see our view pop up, and boom, we do see it pop up. Now, one thing which is pretty glaring here is the text size is a smidge too small, I would say. I feel like we can definitely make it bigger. And we might want to even move up, you know, like the buttons, or maybe add like this nice little logo in here where maybe we can offer a free trial or something, since it's a lot of empty space, I feel like. So our calculations are definitely correct. we have, something that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and increase the font sizes, and we'll get rid of this background color here, and we'll do one final run to, make sure it's looking better than what it currently is. So for the font size here for the sentence, I'm going to go ahead and make this maybe 26. For the price label, I'll make this 22. And let's go ahead and make this sentence longer. So we're going to say, join Thoughts Premium to read unlimited articles and browse thousands of posts, period. Let's go ahead and give that a run, and let's see if the increased font size, longer text, and increased price label font size make it look better. I think it should, and I think it'll be a good place for us to get started, and of course we can continue to iterate on the UI as we progress. So bear with me here. Okay, looking a lot better. So we've got our price here. The price being that thin is not really looking too great, so let's see if regular looks better. So I generally like the price to look a little softer than the text that's describing what you're buying, so the user's eye is drawn there, but you don't want it to be too thin such that it's not really readable. So go ahead and give it one last run, third time's a charm, and boom. Okay, so this is looking a whole lot better. We've got a nice description. We've got a pretty cool looking crown showing us that it's a premium offering. We've got a title as well as our buy button and restore button. So we don't have this hooked up just quite yet to actual, RevenueCat hooks, but we will in the next video. So let's go ahead and hit this close button, make sure it is in fact closing, and we're good to go. So that is the end of this video. The next thing that I'd like you guys to do, a little bit of homework before the next video, is head on over to RevenueCat.com and create a free account. I'll walk you guys through, of course, how to create that account and set up your in-app purchases in the next video. But if you'd like to follow along, head on over and create that account, and we can get started with their dashboard in the next video. So if you haven't done so already, drop a like down below. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you hit any errors, any roadblocks, and of course subscribe for more. Stick around for the next part in this series, and I'll see you guys there.